Hey everyone, and welcome back to our home room. I hope you are staying warm, especially those of you in Florida like me. We had some really cold weather recently, even here in Orlando. So hopefully you're staying warm and hopefully your kids aren't going too crazy, which seems to happen this time of year, whether the weather is rough or the weather is great. I don't know what it is. I don't know what happens in February. I think everyone just gets a little antsy for the end of the season. I'm not sure, but this is why I'm spending the next couple episodes, last episode, this episode, and next week or in 2 weeks, talking about enforcing boundaries because that's what I found that I needed to really step up with in my classroom in February. The kids just tested limits a little more. I think everyone's just feeling a little squirrely. So, last week, if you didn't watch, we talked about enforcing boundaries and how important it is because it provides our children with a sense of safety. When you are that sturdy leader and you are able to tell them no in a kind and firm way because you have their best interest at heart, not because you're trying to control or be a boss or overpower, but because you know that this is the best for them and this is the best for the household. It maintains everyone's rights and freedoms while maintaining safety and order in the home. So it helps our children feel safe. It makes them know that they can trust you, and that with that comes respect. Then they're respecting you. We talked about being careful not being a pushover. When we let our kids lead the family too much and we just kind of do too much of what they want, and we don't have boundaries with them, they feel a little off. They don't feel safe that you are trusting them. You're the one that should be leading. So it can cause a little bit of anxiety. It can cause them to feel distrustful of you and maybe lose a little respect. So it's really important that we learn how to enforce boundaries, even if that can make our kids uncomfortable. Yeah, nobody likes to have a consequence enforced, but it is absolutely necessary to keep our kids feeling safe. And there is a way to do it that is not harmful. In the past, we have generations and generations we've used punishment because we believe the only way to get children to behave is to make them feel bad. And actually, that just makes things worse, which is what we're going to talk about today. Punishments do not work. They may seem to work, and we're going to talk about why, but they don't work to actually change your children's behavior. They do not provide the need of safety, which is the whole reason your children are trying to push your limits anyway. So instead, we want to use what I call connected consequences. Consequences absolutely can be used in a way that is kind and firm and reinforces boundaries, rules, routines, expectations that help the family run smoothly. So I'm going to go over today then why punishments don't work and how to use consequences effectively because they do work. They provide our children with that need of safety in a kind and firm way. So it's a win-win for both of us, right? I'm getting my needs met of whatever rule and structure I need maintained in the house, and the children are getting their needs met because those consequences are delivered in a way that is kind and firm. They feel safe. They feel that they can trust you. They know what to expect. So let's go ahead and dive in. Just a reminder, there is a link below for a worksheet in a reference sheet if you want to look that over while you're listening. Or if you're not watching on YouTube, you can tune in on YouTube, and that's where I have slides up so you can kind of follow along if you're more of a visual learner. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive into consequences versus punishments. So, consequences are an essential way to enforce boundaries that also maintains a secure, connected relationship with your child. Lately, I have heard a lot of parenting experts that are advising parents away from using consequences, and I wholeheartedly disagree. As a teacher in the classroom, there is no way I could have run that room without having consequences. I feel that they are an extremely necessary tool for enforcing boundaries. But the reason I think parenting experts are pushing away from consequences is because they are often confused with punishments. And punishments are terrible. Punishments do not work. They make it worse for both us and our child. Not just our child, they're also not good for us. But they've been used for generations, so we think that's the only way to do that. And that's why I really want to spend this episode defining for you the difference between punishments and consequences. Because when you can get the use of consequences down, when you can really own how to do those effectively, they are great. They are perfect. I use them all the time. But there are some rules for how to do those consequences effectively so that they are not punishments. This is why I call them connected consequences, because true consequences keep that connection between me and my child. So remember that connection, that relationship with our child is more important than anything else, because that is what provides them the most important need of belonging. When they have their belonging needs met, they are much more likely to feel good, which means they are much more likely to have good behavior. So let's first talk a little bit about punishments. What are they and why do they make things worse? So first of all, a punishment is suffering, pain, or a loss that serves as retribution. Punishments are often actually a form of revenge. Could also be a form of power seeking on your part as the parent. So all that is actually parents misbehaving, right? We feel hurt. So then we go to hurt. So if the child hurts our feelings and we're down in that and we get our feelings hurt, then we want revenge. We want to make them feel as bad as we feel. So we're going to take their good things away. We're going to take their things they really want away. So all that is revenge seeking behavior, right? We think, well, if we make them feel that bad, they'll stop doing that behavior. But all that does is make the child feel worse. When the child feels worse, guess what they'd want to do? Get revenge, right? So then it just creates this cycle of bad behavior of me hurting my child hurting me hurting my child, and it just keeps going. And honestly, if that keeps going and keeps going, it can cause such a rift of hurt between you and your child that it may be really, really hard to mend that rift. That could cause some permanent disconnection and where your child just pulls away from you completely. So we have to be careful because punishments are revenge-seeking behavior. Can also be power-seeking behavior. If you feel like your child is overpowering you, you may step up and think, no, I'm going to show them who's boss. So then you step in with even more power, which makes them feel like they want more power. So again, it's just a cycle of me having power, them having power, and it just keeps going. Eventually, in that scenario, your child will probably give up, and the same thing happens. They will pull away. So punishments are not effective. Why? Well, feelings drive behavior. And because punishments make children feel worse, that's all that's going to do is cause worse behavior. Remember that the whole reason we act in the ways that we do is to get a need met. Our whole goal as humans is to get our needs met at all times. So when our needs are met, we feel good. And then when we feel good, we make good choices. We make healthy choices, and they're good, positive choices. However, when we feel bad, when our needs are not met, then we can act badly, right? So feelings drive behavior. So if I am enacting a punishment that makes my child feel bad, you are just going to get more misbehavior. But people will say, yeah, but in the past, punishments worked. It kept kids in line. Aha. However, punishments create something called compliance. Compliance is simply the illusion of good behavior, but it's not actually good behavior. Your child hasn't actually changed their behavior for a good because they want to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're just acting better because they don't want to get in trouble. So let's talk about compliance. Compliance causes children to focus on pleasing the parent to avoid the punishment. Instead of changing their behavior, they're looking at you. What dance and people pleasing do I need to do? Because I don't want to be punished. I don't want to be shamed, humiliated. I don't want my favorite things taken away. So what dance do I need to put on? What do I need to show my parents so that it looks like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? So the focus becomes on you and avoiding punishment rather than actually changing their behavior. Compliance and punishments create a me versus you relationship. You are clearly hurting the other child. Now they have to be defensive of you. They have to pull back from you. It causes disconnection. So it's going to create that me versus you. Punishments just promote other misbehavior. Yes, could you get that specific behavior in line? Yes, but then out the side is going to seep all of these other misbehaviors because you're making someone feel bad, right? So you're going to promote things like lying because, again, they're just trying to avoid that punishment. They don't really care about changing their behavior. They don't want to be punished. So they might lie to you. It might cause manipulation. It could cause some cheating. And then it could also cause rebellion. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the worst of all of this is when this repeats, when you're repeatedly giving punishments, it's going to cause retreat, which is where your child eventually gives up, pulls back, and disconnects from you completely. And that is really, really hard to mend down the road. So punishments just hurt, they cause disconnection, and they do not make your child's behavior better, which is the goal, right? I want my child's behavior to be better. So if punishments hurt and cause other misbehavior, that's making my life worse too. It might be different misbehaviors. Yeah, maybe that one's better, but it's going to cause all these other issues that I now have to deal with. So we do not want to use punishments. I'm going to give an example of what might happen at work. So a work compliance example. So imagine you're at a job and you are late repeatedly for work. You know you're not supposed to be late. That's already an established rule. So imagine you walk into a meeting. This is maybe your third or fourth day late, and your boss shames you in front of the whole group, humiliates you, embarrasses you, and then takes away your vacation days or makes you sit in a desk by the bathroom in the back corner, or tells you can't go hang out with you. They know you have a really fun event that evening, and they tell you you have to stay late for work that day, 3 hours late, to punish you. We know that is excessive, and that's mean and hurtful. Might you show up for work on time the next few days? Yes, but not because you're wanting to cooperate with that boss, not because you respect them and you're like, oh yeah, I really should change my behavior because this is harming the company, or this is harming, my team or whatever. They're not thinking that. They're thinking, I guess I'll show up because I don't want to be punished. I want to avoid the punishment that comes with that. And that is a completely different feeling than cooperation. When we feel valued, we feel respected as part of the team, we may be more willing to cooperate and do the right thing. So shaming and humiliation, taking away things that people love, hurting them just to make them feel bad, does not work. So what does work? Why do consequences work? Because consequences create cooperation. Cooperation is the desire to work together toward a shared goal. So consequences are respectful. They foster belonging by creating a we're in this together against this problem. So that means that children will feel better. And when they feel better, they are more likely to act better. So let's go back to that work example with cooperation. So instead of just making you stay late and missing your personal night that you had that night, or instead of making you sit in a bad place or making you feel bad in front of the meeting, what if they pulled you aside at the end and said, hey, listen, you're late for work every day. We've talked about it. We've got to figure out a solution. This is not working. They give you the reason. It is a necessary boundary because your team is now behind because you're coming in late. We've got to figure this out. Come meet me at lunchtime. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out something that'll work. I want to make this better for you. How can we get this to work? What can we do so that you're getting to work on time? There's a consequence built in. They're meeting at lunch, so they don't get a free lunch that day. And also then they're feeling valued. They're feeling respected. They're feeling part of the team. Like, I want to help you. How can we help you get to work on time? Because this isn't working. It's hurting all of us. We've got to come up with something that works. So consequences are something that helps promote cooperation because it's creating that we're in this together. It's creating that belonging, and people are more likely to then want to work towards that shared goal. Not perfectly, right? But most of the time. Another note I want to make about compliance is that rewards also actually cause compliance. Rewards don't really work either. I don't harp a lot on this because I am guilty of using rewards in the classroom. It was really difficult not to. They're not as harmful as punishments. However, they do cause children to focus on getting the reward, not on changing their behavior. So it does become, what dance do I need to do to win the reward, which can also cause cheating and lying and manipulation in order to get that reward. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't harm our children necessarily to use rewards, but it will not bring you the results you think it will. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes there's just these small little misbehaviors and a reward just works for something brief. But if it is something that's repeated misbehaviors and you're using rewards and not seeing that behavior change, that is why. So you're going to want to work instead to come up with consequences. So how do we use consequences effectively? We're going to talk about that next. So how do we use consequences effectively? There are some rules that make consequences good and effective, and they may seem like a lot, but I promise you, once you get them and understand them, it will become second nature to you. It did for me, and it got to the point that as soon as I saw an overstepped rule or routine in the classroom, it was very easy for me to come up with a consequence in the moment. So, consequences are only for overstepped boundaries. They are revealed in advance. They are related to the misbehavior. They are respectful to the person, to the child, and they are consistently enforced. So again, I call these connected consequences because it is for their safety. It is for them to be able to trust expectations. And so it keeps our connection intact. So the first rule is they are only for overstepped necessary boundaries. They do not work for other misbehaviors. This is also a common misconception and why I think many parenting experts try to guide parents away from consequences, because they try to use them for everything. No, consequences are only for overstepped rules, routines, structures, any kind of boundary you have in the home. They are not for things like defiance. They're not for disrespect, for lying, or for fighting, anything like that. Those are all different kind of misbehaviors. And if you're not sure what to do for those will be in my other episodes. And you can go back to episode 4, where I do briefly discuss the 6 needs and the 6 misbehaviors that come from each need. But really, the reason we are applying strategies like consequences with our children is to provide them a need. Consequences specifically provide the need of enforced boundaries, which comes from a need of safety. So if you are using consequences for power-seeking behavior, then it's not going to work. So that is first. These overstep boundaries also need to be necessary. They're necessary rules, routines, or structures that maintain order and safety in the home while respecting the rights and freedoms of others. Boundaries are not about control. So if you are having a hard time in your own mind justifying the necessity of a certain boundary or rule, it could be your own feeling of control. So you want to be careful of that. The boundary should be necessary, because then it's so much easier also to convince our children to follow it when it's not just you wanting to be bossy. So if it's actually got a real reason for that. Okay, so that's the first rule. It's only for overstepped necessary boundaries. The next thing is they need to be revealed in advance. That is only fair that children know what the consequence is for not following that rule. You may not know right away. There were sometimes kids broke a rule that I didn't even know was a rule that couldn't be broken until they broke it. And then what I would do often is I'd use that first time kind of as a warning and then reveal what the consequence would be if they did it again. But either way, you cannot enforce a consequence without making sure that the children knew in advance what that consequence was. So they need to be revealed in advance. They also should be related directly to that misbehavior. It's not something indirect, and this is where taking cell phones away can be tricky, because if you're taking the cell phone away for anything that has nothing to do with the actual cell phone, then you could be using it as a punishment and it's not a real consequence. So the consequence should be directly related. The fourth rule is they need to be respectful. They need to come from a we mindset, that we are in this together, and an understanding that making mistakes, overstepping boundaries, pushing limits is natural. That is normal. So you're not judging them harshly for that. It might still make you mad. You're going to have negative feelings because you're going to be frustrated. But using your own negative feelings to act is then your own misbehavior, and we have to be careful of that. So yes, children are going to overstep boundaries. It's going to irritate you, which is why that first step of pause, bring your energy down and try to, deal with them from that place. It'll help a lot. So you just need to deliver them respectfully, because that keeps it keeps that connection, and they're much more likely to behave better and want to cooperate. And then the last, probably most important and probably least followed rule of consequences is they must be consistently enforced. They have to be consistent. If they are not consistent, your children will think you don't really mean it, or that it's actually not really as important as you said it was, or you would enforce that boundary. So they have to be forced every time, or that pushing will just continue because they're not getting the need met of enforced boundaries. You're not enforcing them. So they're going to keep pushing that limit, looking for that safety. So I want to give you a couple real world examples. Let's talk about the real world boundary of having to pay your electric bill on time. This is a necessary rule because the electric company cannot just fund everyone's electricity for free. They do not have the money for that. It is your responsibility to pay your bill, and you know when the date is. So let's say you don't pay your bill on time. Well, you're going to get a nice little letter in the mail that's going to say, hey, you haven't paid your electric bill. If you do not pay it by this time, your electric will be cut off. So that is the reveal in advance. They tell you in advance what's going to happen, what that consequence is if you continue to overstep that boundary. It is related, right? The electric company is not telling you can't go out with your friends later, right? They're not telling you can't go on your vacation. They're simply saying if you don't pay that, then that goes away, right? So it is completely related. It is respectful. They're not lecturing you. They're not saying how disappointed they are in you. They're not, humiliating you or shaming you. There's no disrespect to it. It's just like, hey, it happens sometimes, but if you keep it up, we got to take your electricity away. And it has to be enforced consistently every time. When that due date comes, when it says you need to pay it by this day or electricity goes off, they sure enough cut it off. If they didn't, you wouldn't believe them. And you'd keep pushing it. You're like, they say they're going to, but they don't. So maybe I can keep pushing it, right? All right, another great example is our garbage men that come get the garbage truck 2 days a week. Those are the days that the garbage truck comes, and those are the days you need to have your garbage can out. If the garbage can is not put out, the garbage won't be picked up. They tell you that when you sign up for garbage service. So in advance, if the garbage is not out when it's supposed to be out, you will not have your garbage picked up. It's just related. They don't, again, call you and make you feel bad for not putting your garbage out on time. They just don't pick it up. And it's very related. It's respectful. They're not rude. And then it is consistent. So now imagine if one day they did come back. If you called them, you're like, oh man, I really forgot to I'm so sorry. I forgot to put my garbage out. Can you please come pick it up? If they do, you're thinking, okay. So if I miss it again, I can just call them and they'll come back. So then the next time it's time to put the garbage out, you might not put it out on time because you're like, I can just call later. So then why keep following that rule? So let's talk about a couple examples that are something you might run into with your children. So a really common one I hear is children not making it to the car in time to leave for school in the morning. So the first thing to go through the steps is this an overstepped boundary, and is it necessary? Is this a necessary boundary that our kids get into the car on time in the morning? If it is, then it's easy for you to justify. If it doesn't really matter, it's going to be really hard to justify. So you've got to find a reason why them getting to school getting in the car is important, why getting to school on time is important. Discuss that with them. Just say, hey, this is a repeated behavior I'm seeing. We've got to get this changed. So if this continues to happen, then decide on a limit. I'm not going to take you to school. The next time you are late in the morning, this has happened. I have to get to work. You're going to have to stay home if the child's old enough. Or you're going to have to get the tardy at school. That's a very real consequence that is set up. And let them continue to get tardies at school. So you have to figure out a way, what is the necessary rule? Why is it important? Communicate that, reveal in advance. And then sometimes if you're able to, don't take them to school. Very, very rarely do you have to enforce consequences more than about 2 or 3 times before they know you're serious. So sometimes you can set a very serious consequence up like that, just knowing that, okay, today's going to be the day. If they do not get in the car, they're staying home. And sometimes that is what's necessary for them to take you seriously. All right, let's go to the second reason. So what if your child has not been doing homework because they've been playing video games? First step, is this an overstepped necessary boundary? Yes, because grades will go down, right? It's not good for them to give up their responsibilities in order to be irresponsible and play video games all the time. So that get very clear on the necessary boundary there, on why that is so necessary. Maybe discuss this problem with them. Decide on a consequence to try for a week, and then you can reevaluate. So that's one way to handle it, is discuss with them, hey, you've been playing video games all week, and that's really, you're skipping your homework, and that's really going to hurt your grade. How about let's try this week, no video games, just for a few days after school, see if that helps you get back on track. Talk about it with them, get their feedback on that. And that is a cooperative conversation where you're working together to come up with a consequence that might work. Because you're saying to them, I don't want you to see, I know your grades are important, and I don't want to see your grades go down. How can we work together to come up with a better routine or structure for you so that it's not hurting your grades? You can also just allow the consequence of the bad grade to happen. There is already a consequence built in to that scenario, and you can just let them go to school and not have their homework done and then get bad grades and then work from there. Ooh, why did you think you got bad grades? Oh yeah, from doing video games instead of homework. Okay, so then what can you do instead? So really, consequences are just a way to help your children build routines and build structures that are healthy, that maintain order and safety for them or for the home or for you, right? It's just creating habits and structures. This is not a need for punishment or being mean. You want to help them. You're in this together with them to help them build up good patterns and habits. They don't have those necessary skills when they're young. So when you're on their side and you're just giving those consequences together and you're working together on that, it really helps them want to follow those consequences. But also super important to enforce them and be okay with the discomfort that they'll feel when those consequences are enforced. It is okay to feel a little discomfort. You guys are already feeling uncomfortable, right? There's already discomfort in the home because the rule and routine is not being followed. So it is better to have a day or two of discomfort from enforcing a boundary than it is to have the ongoing continual discomfort from overstepping the routine or the boundary and really messing up the whole order of the home. So yes, consequences can be uncomfortable, but they are absolutely necessary to make sure we follow through so our children know what's to be expected. And the more you can involve them, the better. Homework this week are just 2 questions to just get you thinking about enforcing boundaries, punishments, consequences, and how that's working for you. So number 1, think of a boundary that you have been enforcing. Is it necessary? Is it a necessary overstepped boundary, or is it control? If you feel that it's a bit of control, can you find what behavior you want to control and why? Because sometimes there might be a hidden necessary boundary underneath it. So sometimes if you think, well, I just want them in the car because I want them in the car on time. Well, okay, why? But keep going. Why do you think you want them in the car on time in the morning? There has to be dig deep in there. There is often something that is necessary underneath that. And it could be as simple as I have a day to go on and do, and you are overstepping on my time. So that is okay too, as long as it is necessary. So really think through those times when you're like, oh, I think I might just actually be trying to control this behavior. See if there is actually underneath there a hidden necessary boundary. If, however, you discover it is actually just about control, why? Why are you trying to control this behavior? How is it not being in control causing you negative feelings, and why? And see if you can explore that a little bit. All right, number 2, think of the last time you used a punishment. Why did you use that punishment? Was it because of your own negative emotions? Were you angry? Were you wanting revenge? You wanted them to feel as bad as they're making you feel. Were you feeling powerless? So you felt like you had to step up your power to show them who's boss. So if that's the case and it's tempting to want to continue using punishments, do what you can to work through those negative feelings first before even attempting to create any consequences. Because if you have that feeling underneath it, like you're angry and you're feeling powerless and you're feeling all that, and you're trying to develop a consequence, chances are it's going to come out as a punishment because you're angry. So that's why that taking the breath, breathing, pulling your energy down, really going through those steps of a consequence. What is the necessary and force boundary that is needed here? What is actually necessary? Bring your energy down, trying to think realistically. Think like the electric company would or the garbage truck company. Think through that and think of actually what is really the necessary boundary here that needs to be enforced. And then follow those rules. And then you're sure you're coming from a place of connection. And that's what will make that a consequence, which will promote more cooperation from your kids and not all the misbehaviors that come from the punishments. And that is it for this week. Please like or subscribe or follow or share with any parents that you know that really could benefit, especially this time of year. I'm sure you are not the only parent that's having to deal with a little extra misbehavior. So please share as much as you can. I really want to get this information out to as many parents as could use that. Also, please reach out to me if you have questions or comments. I'd love to hear from you. And my email address is my name, kristentame@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.